The message arrived at 3 in the morning, Earth Standard Time. Commander Marcus Cole was not sleeping. He had not slept well in 15 years, not since the Battle of Kepler Station. The nightmares always found him in the dark. So he sat by the window of his small apartment on Thyra Prime, watching the alien city glow beneath 3 moons, and he waited for dawn like he always did. The communication device on his desk beeped twice. He walked over and read the message. His face showed no emotion, but his hands tightened into fists. "The Queen requests your presence at the Crystal Throne, immediately." Marcus read it again. The Queen, not an advisor, not a minister. The Queen herself had summoned him. That was not normal. That was not normal at all. He was just a military attaché, a soldier assigned to the human embassy on this alien world. His job was simple. He observed. He reported. He stayed quiet and caused no trouble. Humanity was new to the galaxy, only 50 years since first contact, and they were still learning how to walk among species that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. The Valanthi were the oldest of them all. Their empire, the hegemony, stretched across 200 star systems. They were tall and beautiful, with silver skin and eyes like purple gems. They lived for 1,000 years. They moved through their palace like gods, and they looked at humans the way a king might look at insects crawling across his floor. Marcus dressed quickly. His uniform was simple, dark blue, no medals, no ribbons. He had earned many honors in his career, but he never wore them. The men and women who had died beside him could not wear their medals. It did not feel right for him to wear his. He looked at himself in the mirror. He was 52 years old. His hair was gray at the temples. A scar ran from his left eyebrow down to his cheek, a gift from a piece of shrapnel on Proxima Colony. His eyes were tired, but they were steady. He had seen too much to be afraid of an alien queen. The transport arrived within minutes. 2 Valanthi guards stood at the door, their armor shining like liquid silver. They did not greet him. They did not even look at him. To them, he was beneath notice. Marcus did not mind. He had been beneath notice his entire life. It was a useful place to be. The transport flew through the night city. Thyra Prime was beautiful, Marcus had to admit. The buildings rose like crystal towers, catching the light of the 3 moons and scattering it into rainbows. Rivers of light flowed through the streets, not water, but something the Valanthi had created long ago, a liquid that glowed with soft blue fire. Everything here was ancient and perfect and untouched by war. That was the thing about the Valanthi. They had not fought a real battle in 3,000 years. They ruled through politics, through threats, through the simple weight of their age and power. Other species bowed to them because they were afraid of what might happen if they did not. But the Valanthi had never actually tested that fear. They had never needed to. The Crystal Throne was exactly what its name suggested, a massive palace built entirely from a single piece of transparent crystal, grown over 10,000 years by Valanthi engineers. It caught the moonlight and held it, so the entire building seemed to glow from within. Marcus had seen it many times from a distance. He had never been inside. The guards led him through corridors that stretched forever. The walls showed images of Valanthi history, their ancient kings, their conquered worlds, their endless triumphs. There were no images of battles. There were no images of sacrifice, just glory forever and ever without cost. Finally, they reached the throne room. It was vast. 1,000 people could have stood inside and still had room to dance. The ceiling rose so high that clouds actually formed near the top, tiny wisps of moisture that drifted in the warm air. And at the far end, on a throne carved from a single purple diamond, sat Queen Seraphil III. She was young for a Valanthi, barely 200 years old. She had taken the throne just 1 year ago after her mother's death. Her skin was pale silver, almost white, and her eyes burned with cold purple fire. She was beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, sharp and dangerous and designed to cut. The throne room was full of people. Ambassadors and representatives from dozens of species stood in careful groups, each one wearing the colors of their world. Marcus recognized some of them. The Korathi, small and gray-skinned, freed from slavery just 12 years ago. The Dreth, massive reptilian warriors who had once been humanity's enemies and were now something like friends. The Yanari, delicate beings made of living light. All of them had been summoned here, just like him. Marcus understood now. This was a ceremony. The new queen wanted to remind everyone of their place. She wanted them to kneel and reaffirm their loyalty to the hegemony. She wanted to feel powerful. He walked forward alone, his boots echoing on the crystal floor. The other species watched him pass. Some looked curious. Others looked amused. A few, the Korathi especially, looked worried on his behalf. The human ambassador was supposed to be here. A skilled diplomat named Sarah Chen who knew how to smile and bow and say the right things. But Sarah had fallen ill 2 days ago, some alien virus that her body could not fight. She was recovering, but slowly. That left only Marcus, a soldier, a man who had never learned to bow. He stopped 20 feet from the throne and stood at attention. He did not kneel. He did not lower his eyes. He simply waited. Queen Seraphil studied him like a scientist studying a strange insect. Her lips curved into a small, cruel smile. "So," she said, her voice echoing through the vast chamber, "this is what humanity sends to honor their queen, not an ambassador, not a leader, a soldier." She spoke the word like it was something dirty. Marcus said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence was often the best response. The queen rose from her throne and descended the crystal steps. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, and she moved with the grace of a predator. The courtiers around her stepped back, giving her room. She walked in a slow circle around Marcus, examining him from every angle. "Look at you," she said. "You are so small, so fragile. Your species lives, what, 80 years? 100 if you are lucky. We live for 1,000. We have ruled this galaxy since before your ancestors climbed down from the trees." Still Marcus said nothing. His face remained calm, his posture straight. Inside, he felt the old familiar cold settling into his bones, the cold that came before battle, the cold that had kept him alive through 28 wars. The queen stopped in front of him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something sweet and alien, and probably worth more than his entire year's salary. "I have heard stories about humans," she said softly. "They say you are violent, aggressive, that you fight and kill each other over nothing. They say you are dangerous." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "But I look at you, and I see nothing dangerous. I see a small, scarred creature standing in my throne room, pretending to be brave." Her eyes narrowed. "Tell me, human, should I be afraid of you?" Marcus met her gaze without flinching. 15 years of war had burned away any fear he might have felt. "No, your majesty," he said quietly. "You should not be afraid of me." The queen smiled, satisfied with his answer, but Marcus was not finished. "You should be afraid," he said, "of what made me." The throne room went completely silent. Queen Seraphil stared at Marcus, her purple eyes widening just slightly. For a moment the mask of arrogance slipped and something else showed through. Surprise, maybe even a flicker of uncertainty. Then she laughed again, louder this time, and the moment passed. "What made you?" she repeated, turning to address the crowd. "Did you hear that? The human thinks he is mysterious. He thinks he is frightening." The Valanthi courtiers laughed with their queen, the sound filling the vast chamber like the chatter of exotic birds. But Marcus noticed that the other species did not laugh. The Korathi ambassador watched with wide, careful eyes. The Dreth war chief stood with his arms crossed, his scarred face unreadable. Seraphil turned back to Marcus. "Very well, little human. Let us play your game. Tell me, what made you? What terrible experiences have shaped you into this fearsome warrior standing before me?" She said the words with mocking sweetness, like an adult humoring a foolish child. Marcus remained still. He thought about not answering. He thought about staying silent and letting the Queen have her moment of triumph. That would be the diplomatic thing to do. That would be what Sarah Chen would have advised. But Sarah Chen was not here, and Marcus Cole had never been very good at diplomacy. "Experience, Your Majesty," he said simply. "Experience?" The Queen raised one elegant eyebrow. "What kind of experience?" "The kind that leaves scars." Seraphil stepped closer, her eyes traveling over the visible scar on his face. "One scar does not make a warrior human. One wound does not make you special. I have seen servants injured worse in kitchen accidents." "This is not my only scar," Marcus replied. "Just the only one you can see." The Queen's smile flickered. She did not like this game anymore. This human was supposed to cower. He was supposed to stammer and apologize and remind her of human weakness. Instead, he stood before her like a stone wall, unmoved by her power. She decided to change tactics. "Let us speak plainly then," she said, her voice turning cold. "Since humanity joined our hegemony 50 years ago, you have been nothing but trouble. You expand too quickly. You breed too fast. You make alliances with species far above your station." She gestured at the Korathi ambassador, who flinched under her gaze. "And worst of all," she continued, "you fight, constantly, endlessly, like animals that cannot control their own nature." Marcus said nothing. He simply waited. "So tell me, human." The Queen's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire chamber. "How many battles has your pathetic species fought since joining our hegemony? How many times have you raised weapons and spilled blood like the primitives you are?" She expected shame. She expected embarrassment. She expected him to lower his eyes and mumble some small number, proving that humanity was exactly what she said, violent but insignificant. Marcus looked directly into her eyes. 28, Your Majesty." The number hung in the air like thunder after lightning. 28. The Valanthi courtiers stopped laughing. The other ambassadors shifted uneasily. Even Queen Seraphil seemed frozen for a moment, her perfect composure cracking just slightly. 28 battles in 50 years. The Valanthi had fought one battle in 3,000 years, one battle in 30 centuries, and this small, short-lived species had fought 28 wars in half a century. 28, the Queen repeated slowly. 28 battles. "Yes, Your Majesty." Seraphil recovered quickly, but Marcus saw the calculation in her eyes. She was reassessing, reevaluating, trying to find a way to turn this revelation to her advantage. "Well," she said finally, forcing a laugh, "that certainly proves my point. 28 wars, 28 failures, 28 times your species proved it cannot live in peace with others." She turned to the crowd, spreading her arms wide. "Do you see now why humanity must be watched? Why they must be controlled? They are children playing with fire. They start wars they cannot win, and then they come crawling to us for protection." The Valanthi courtiers murmured in agreement, but Marcus noticed that the other species remained silent. They were waiting, watching. "I apologize, Your Majesty," Marcus said quietly. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding." Seraphil turned back to him, her eyes narrowing. "Oh, what misunderstanding?" "You said 28 failures." Marcus shook his head slowly. "You assumed we lost those battles." The throne room went very, very still. "We did not lose," Marcus continued, his voice calm and steady. 28 battles in 50 years, 28 victories. Humanity has not lost a single war since joining the galactic community. For a long moment, no one spoke. No one moved. The Queen stared at Marcus as if he had suddenly grown a second head. "That is impossible," she finally said. "No species wins every war. No species has such a record." "We do." "You are lying." Marcus shook his head. "I am a soldier, Your Majesty. I do not lie about war. I have too much respect for the dead." Seraphil's face twisted with anger. This was not going the way she had planned. This ceremony was supposed to demonstrate her power, her dominance. Instead, this scarred human was standing in her throne room, claiming victories that even the Valanthi could not match. How, she demanded. How can a species so young, so weak, so primitive defeat enemy after enemy? What trick are you playing? No trick, Marcus said, just truth. Then explain it to me. The Queen's voice was sharp as a blade. Explain how humans win wars against species older and stronger than yourselves. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He thought about all the battles he had seen, all the friends he had buried, all the impossible situations that should have ended in defeat. We win, he said finally, because we do not know how to surrender. The Queen laughed, but it was a harsh sound, empty of humor. Every species knows how to surrender. It is basic survival. Perhaps, Marcus nodded slowly, but humans, we are different. When everything is lost, when there is no hope, when any sensible species would lay down their weapons and accept defeat, that is when humans fight hardest. He paused, letting the words sink in. You ask how we win, Your Majesty. The answer is simple. We win because we refuse to lose. We win because we would rather die on our feet than live on our knees. We win because surrender is not in our nature. The Dreth Warchief made a low sound in his throat, a sound of respect. The Korathi ambassador's eyes were shining with something that looked like hope. But Queen Seraphil was not impressed. She was furious. Pretty words, she spat, but words do not win wars. No, Marcus agreed. Sacrifice wins wars, and humans know sacrifice better than any species in this galaxy. You know nothing of sacrifice. Your species is barely out of its infancy. You have existed for the blink of an eye compared to the Valanthi. Marcus met her gaze steadily. With respect, Your Majesty, that is exactly my point. In 50 years we have fought 28 wars. In 3,000 years you have fought one. We have paid for our victories in blood. We have earned every inch of space we hold. He paused. What have the Valanthi earned? The silence that followed was deafening. No one had ever spoken to a Valanthi queen this way. No one had ever dared. Seraphil's face went pale with rage. Her hands trembled at her sides. For a moment, Marcus thought she might order his execution right there in the throne room. But she did not. Instead, she did something worse. She smiled. You want to talk about sacrifice, she said softly. You want to boast about your 28 little wars. Very well, human, prove it. Tell me about these great battles. Tell me about these glorious victories. She returned to her throne and sat down, looking at him with cold, hungry eyes. Entertain me. Marcus looked around the throne room. 1,000 faces stared back at him, alien, hostile, curious. This was a trap. The Queen wanted him to boast, to brag, to prove that humans were exactly the violent primitives she claimed. But Marcus Cole did not boast. He had never bragged about war in his life. Instead, he would tell the truth. And the truth, he knew, was far more terrifying than any boast could ever be. Very well, Your Majesty, he said quietly. I will tell you about our wars, but I warn you there is no glory in what I am about to say. Only blood, only fire, only the stubborn refusal to die. He took a deep breath. Let me tell you about Kepler Station. Marcus began to speak, and the throne room listened. Kepler Station was our first battle, year one of humanity's presence in the galaxy. We had built a small outpost on the edge of explored space, 300 colonists, scientists, farmers, families, children. He paused, letting the image settle in the minds of his audience. The Dreth found them. Across the room, the Dreth Warchief shifted uncomfortably. That was ancient history now, but it was not forgotten. In those days, the Dreth were raiders. They took what they wanted and killed anyone who resisted. They arrived at Kepler with 12 warships. We had nothing. No fleet. No weapons, just 300 civilians and a handful of security officers with pistols. Queen Seraphil leaned forward, expecting to hear how humans had begged for mercy, how they had surrendered, how the Velanthe had needed to rescue them. The Dreth demanded our surrender, Marcus continued. They gave us 1 hour to abandon the station, 1 hour to leave everything we had built and flee into the void like frightened animals. And you surrendered, the Queen said. It was not a question. No, Marcus shook his head. We did not. The station commander, a woman named Elena Vasquez, sent back a 2-word reply. What did she say? Come down. The throne room stirred. The Dreth warchief let out a low rumble that might have been a laugh. The Dreth accepted her invitation. Marcus said, they thought it would be easy. 300 civilians against 1,000 trained warriors. It should have been a massacre. He was quiet for a moment, remembering. It was a massacre, just not the kind the Dreth expected. Commander Vasquez turned that station into a death trap. She sealed corridors and vented them into space. She overloaded power systems and turned them into bombs. She led the Dreth through a maze of their own bodies. How many died? The Queen asked quietly. On our side, 212. Men, women, children, more than 2/3 of the colony. The numbers hung in the air, heavy and terrible. On their side, 847. When the Dreth finally retreated, they had lost almost their entire landing force. They never attacked a human station again. Marcus turned to look at the Dreth warchief. The massive reptilian warrior met his gaze and slowly lowered his head in a gesture of respect. That was our first battle, Marcus said. That was when the galaxy learned that humans do not surrender. We paid for that lesson in blood. We paid for it with the lives of children, but we paid it, and we have been paying ever since. Queen Seraphil's face was unreadable. One battle proves nothing. Luck can carry a species through one fight. Then let me tell you about Proxima Colony. Marcus touched the scar on his face. That is where I received this. Year 7. A species called the Vorn decided that our colony was sitting on resources they wanted. They did not bother with ground troops. They simply began bombing us from orbit. He closed his eyes for a moment, and the memories washed over him like a wave. Proxima was a mining world. The colony was built around deep tunnels that went miles underground. When the bombing started, we retreated into those tunnels. The Vorn thought we would starve. They thought we would suffocate. They thought we would beg for mercy within days. How long did you hold out? The question came from the Korathi ambassador, his voice barely a whisper. 3 months. Gasps echoed through the throne room. 3 months in the dark, Marcus continued. 3 months breathing recycled air and eating whatever we could find. 3 months listening to the bombs fall overhead. The tunnels were irradiated. The water was poison. Every day, people died from sickness and hunger and despair. He opened his eyes and looked directly at the Queen. But we did not surrender. We held, we waited. And when our fleet finally arrived, when our ships broke through the Vorn blockade, we came crawling out of those tunnels like ghosts. Pale, starving, dying, but alive, still fighting, still refusing to give up. What happened to the Vorn? Queen Seraphil asked. They do not exist anymore. Marcus's voice was flat, empty of emotion. After Proxima, humanity decided that the Vorn were too dangerous to leave alone. We found their homeworld. We offered them peace. They refused. He did not need to say more. The implication was clear. That was our second battle. Shall I continue? The Queen said nothing. She simply stared at him with those cold purple eyes. So Marcus continued. He told them about the liberation of Korathi, where human soldiers had fought and died to free a species they had never met, a species they owed nothing to. He told them about the Battle of the Drift, where a single human destroyer had held a hyperspace corridor against a pirate fleet for 18 hours, buying time for civilian ships to escape. He told them about Operation Sunfall, where a team of human engineers had crashed a moon into an enemy space station because it was the only way to stop an invasion. Story after story, battle after battle, victory after victory. But Marcus did not make them sound like victories. He made them sound like what they were: desperate struggles against impossible odds. He spoke of sacrifice and loss and pain. He spoke of soldiers who threw themselves on grenades to save their friends. He spoke of pilots who crashed their ships into enemy weapons because they had no missiles left. He spoke of ordinary people who became heroes simply because there was no one else. Year 31, he said, his voice growing hoarse. The liberation of the Korathi. Across the room, the Korathi ambassador had tears streaming down his gray face. The syndicate had enslaved them for 2 centuries, used them as workers, as servants, as things to be bought and sold. The hegemony knew about it. Everyone knew about it. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the Velanthi courtiers. No one did anything. The Korathi were a small species with nothing to offer. They had no strategic value, no economic importance. So the galaxy looked away and let them suffer. But humanity did not look away. The Korathi ambassador spoke these words, his voice trembling with emotion. No, Marcus agreed. We did not. When we learned what was happening, we sent a message to the syndicate. We told them to release the Korathi immediately. They laughed at us. They told us to mind our own business. What did you do? The question came from a Yanari representative, her form flickering with agitated light. We made it our business. Marcus's voice was hard as iron. We sent a fleet, not to conquer, not to take resources, just to free people who could not free themselves. The syndicate fought back. They had more ships, more weapons, more experience. We lost 4 cruisers in the first engagement, 1,200 men and women. He paused. But we did not retreat. We sent more ships. We lost more people. We kept sending them until the syndicate realized something important. What? Queen Seraphil asked. That we would never stop. That we would spend our last ship, our last soldier, our last breath to free the Korathi. Because it was right. Because someone needed to stand up for people who could not stand up for themselves. The Korathi ambassador stepped forward, ignoring protocol, ignoring the guards who moved to stop him. Humanity freed my people, he said, his voice ringing through the chamber. They did not ask for payment. They did not demand resources. They fought and died and bled for us because they believed we deserved to be free. He turned to Queen Seraphil. Where were the Velanthi? Where was the hegemony? You have ruled this galaxy for millennia. You have the power to end injustice with a word, but you did nothing. You let us suffer because we were not worth saving. The queen's face flushed with anger. How dare you speak to me this way? You forget your place. No, your majesty. The Korathi ambassador shook his head slowly. For the first time in 200 years, my people know exactly where we stand. We stand with humanity, because humanity stood with us when no one else would. The throne room erupted into chaos. Voices shouted. Guards moved forward. The Velanthi courtiers screamed for order. But Marcus stood silent in the middle of it all, watching the queen's face, watching her realize that she had made a terrible mistake. She had wanted to humiliate humanity. Instead, she had given them a platform to show exactly why they should be feared and respected. The guards restored order eventually. The Korathi ambassador was escorted back to his place, though he went with his head held high. The other species returned to their positions, but something had changed. The air in the throne room felt different, electric, dangerous. Queen Seraphil sat on her diamond throne, her face a mask of controlled fury. Her advisors whispered urgently in her ears, but she waved them away. She had started this game, and she would finish it. Touching stories, she said finally, her voice dripping with venom. Truly touching. The mighty humans fighting for freedom and justice. Is that the image you wish to present, Commander? Marcus remained at attention. I present no image, Your Majesty, only facts. Facts, the Queen laughed, but there was no humor in it. Facts can be twisted. Stories can be exaggerated. How do we know you speak the truth? You do not, Marcus admitted, but I can show you. He reached slowly into his uniform pocket. The guards tensed, hands moving toward weapons, but Marcus moved carefully, showing he meant no threat. He pulled out a small device, no larger than his palm. A hollow recorder, he said. Standard military equipment. Every human soldier carries one. We document our battles. We preserve them for history. He looked at the Queen. May I? Seraphil hesitated. She knew this was dangerous. She knew that whatever was on that device could damage her position further. But she was also curious. She was also proud. And most importantly, she had an audience watching. She could not appear weak. Show us, she commanded. Marcus activated the device. A holographic image appeared in the air above his palm, expanding until it filled the space between him and the throne. The image was grainy, captured by a camera mounted on a soldier's helmet. The throne room fell silent as the recording began to play. Fire, smoke, the sound of explosions and screaming. The image showed a corridor inside a space station. Human soldiers crouched behind makeshift barricades, firing weapons at enemies just out of frame. Bodies lay everywhere. Blood painted the walls. A woman's voice shouted orders. Hold this position. Reinforcements are coming. Just hold. An explosion rocked the corridor. The camera spun wildly as the soldier wearing it was thrown against a wall. When the image stabilized, half the barricade was gone. Half the soldiers were dead. But the survivors kept fighting. They picked up weapons from fallen comrades. They formed a new line. They held. Marcus switched to another recording. A medical bay packed with wounded. A young man with half his face burned away was helping bandage another soldier's wounds. His hands shook. His eyes were empty with shock, but he kept working. Another recording. A pilot in a cockpit, her fighter spinning through space. Warning lights flashed everywhere. Half her instruments were dark. Through the canopy, an enemy cruiser loomed, its weapons charging. This is Lieutenant Sarah Park, she said into her radio, her voice steady despite the situation. My weapons are gone. My engines are damaged. I have one option left. She pushed her throttle forward. Her fighter accelerated toward the enemy cruiser. Tell my daughter I love her. The recording ended in a flash of white light. Marcus switched it off. The throne room was utterly silent. Some of the Velanthe courtiers looked sick. Others looked away, unable to meet anyone's eyes. That was the Battle of Horizon Gate, Marcus said quietly. Year 43. Lieutenant Park destroyed an enemy cruiser by ramming it with her damaged fighter. She saved 3,000 civilians who were evacuating the station. He looked at the Queen. That is what sacrifice looks like, Your Majesty. That is what humans give for victory. Not words, not politics, our lives. Seraphil's hands gripped the arms of her throne so tightly that her silver knuckles went white. Her composure was crumbling. This had gone wrong in every possible way. Enough, she said sharply. I have heard enough of your propaganda. It is not propaganda, it is history. It is barbarism. The Queen stood suddenly, her voice rising to a shout. You speak of sacrifice as if it is something noble, something to be proud of. But all I see is a species that has learned nothing. A species that throws away lives because it is too stupid to find another way. Marcus remained calm. Sometimes there is no other way. There is always another way. The Velanthe have maintained peace for 3,000 years through wisdom and diplomacy. Through intimidation, Marcus corrected quietly. Through the threat of force. Through making other species too afraid to challenge you. And what is wrong with that? Peace is peace, no matter how it is achieved. Marcus shook his head slowly. With respect, Your Majesty, that is not peace. That is fear wearing a mask, and fear only works as long as the mask stays on. He gestured around the room. Look at your empire. Look at the species gathered here. They do not love the Valanthi. They do not respect you. They are here because they are afraid of what happens if they refuse to come. That is not peace. That is a prison with invisible walls. The Queen's face twisted with rage. You dare lecture me about my own empire? I dare speak the truth. The truth? Seraphil descended from her throne, stalking toward Marcus with fury burning in her eyes. The truth is that humanity is a virus infecting this galaxy. You spread too fast. You fight too much. You make allies of slaves and enemies of empires. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the pulse beating in her silver throat. Perhaps what humanity needs is a 29th battle, she whispered. Perhaps you need to be reminded of your place in this galaxy. The threat hung in the air like poison. Marcus met her gaze without flinching. Around the room he could see the other species watching. The Korathi looked frightened. The Dreth war chief had uncrossed his arms, his posture shifting into something dangerous. Even the Valanthi courtiers seemed uncertain, exchanging nervous glances. Your Majesty, Marcus said slowly, I sincerely hope that day never comes. Is that fear I hear in your voice human? No, Marcus shook his head. It is concern, not for humanity, for you. The Queen laughed harshly. You are concerned for me. The human is concerned for the Valanthi. Yes, Marcus's voice was soft, almost gentle, because you do not understand what you would be starting. You see our battles as evidence of our barbarism, but you miss the most important detail. And what is that? We have never started a war. The words fell into silence like stones into still water. In 50 years of conflict, Marcus continued, in 28 battles, humanity has never fired the first shot. We have never invaded another species' territory. We have never attacked without provocation. He paused, letting the implication sink in. Every war we have fought was forced upon us. Every battle was a response to aggression. We did not want those wars. We did not seek them out. But when they came to us, we finished them. His voice hardened. Every single one. The Queen's confidence flickered. For the first time, real uncertainty showed in her eyes. You threaten a 29th battle, Marcus said. You think it will teach humanity humility. But I promise you, Your Majesty, if you start that war, you will learn something instead. What will I learn? Marcus's eyes were cold now, cold as the void between stars, cold as the memories of everyone he had lost. You will learn why every species that has ever attacked humanity no longer exists as a threat. You will learn why the Dreth, who once tried to slaughter us, now call us friends. You will learn why the Vorn homeworld is empty, and why the Syndicate no longer enslaves anyone. He leaned forward slightly, just enough to invade her space. You will learn that humans do not fight to conquer. We fight to survive. And there is nothing in this universe more dangerous than a human fighting for survival. The Queen took a step back. It was involuntary, instinctive, and she knew immediately that everyone had seen it. She had shown weakness. She had retreated from a human. Her advisors rushed forward, surrounding her, whispering urgently. The throne room buzzed with 1,000 conversations. The political landscape of the hegemony was shifting before their eyes. Marcus stood alone in the center of it all, silent and still, waiting for whatever came next. He had said what needed to be said. He had shown them who humanity truly was, not violent savages but survivors, not aggressors but defenders, a species that asked for nothing except the right to exist and would fight to the last breath to protect that right. Now the choice belonged to the Queen. Peace or war? Wisdom or folly? Life or death? The Queen's advisors pulled her aside. Their whispered conversation lasted nearly 10 minutes while the rest of the throne room waited in tense silence. Marcus did not move. He stood at attention, eyes forward, mind calm. He had done what he could. The rest was out of his hands. Finally, Seraphil returned to her throne. Her face had changed. The arrogance was still there, but it was tempered now with something else. Calculation, caution, perhaps even a hint of grudging respect. "Commander Cole," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "you have given me much to consider." Marcus inclined his head slightly. "That was my only intention, Your Majesty." "Was it?" The Queen studied him with those cold purple eyes. "I think your intentions were quite clear. You came here to show me that humanity cannot be intimidated, that threatening your species would be unwise." "I came here because I was summoned," Marcus replied. "I answered honestly because you asked honest questions. I am a soldier. Deception is not my skill." A faint smile crossed the Queen's lips. "No, it clearly is not. You are remarkably blunt for a diplomat." "I am not a diplomat." "No." Seraphil tilted her head, examining him like he was a puzzle she could not quite solve. "You are something far more interesting. You are what your species creates when it has no choice but to fight." She rose from her throne and descended the steps once more, but this time her approach was different, less predatory, more thoughtful. "I have ruled the hegemony for 1 year," she said quietly, speaking now as if they were alone. "In that year, I have learned that my empire is built on foundations of sand. We have maintained control through fear and tradition, not through strength. The Valanthi have not been tested in 3,000 years. We do not know if we could survive a real war." She stopped in front of Marcus, but kept a respectful distance this time. "Your species has been tested constantly. You have been forged in fire that would have destroyed any other civilization, and you have emerged stronger each time." Marcus said nothing, he simply listened. "I made an error today," the Queen continued. "I sought to humiliate humanity and instead revealed the weakness of my own empire. My advisors tell me I should be furious. I should punish you for your insolence." She paused. "But I find that I am not angry. I am impressed and concerned." "Concerned about what, Your Majesty?" "About the future." Seraphil turned to address the entire throne room. "For 3,000 years, the hegemony has maintained peace through the simple fact that no one dared challenge us. But today, I have learned that there is a species in this galaxy that does not know fear. A species that has looked death in the face 28 times and refused to blink." She raised her voice so that every being in the chamber could hear. "That species is not our enemy. They have never been our enemy. They have asked for nothing except the right to exist among the stars. And when that right was threatened, they defended it with everything they had." The Queen looked at the Korathi ambassador, then at the Dreth war chief, then at the representatives of a dozen other species. "Perhaps it is time for the hegemony to learn from humanity's example, not their violence, but their courage, their willingness to sacrifice for what they believe in, their refusal to accept injustice, even when standing against it costs them everything." She turned back to Marcus. "Commander Cole, I withdraw my earlier threats. Humanity is not an enemy of the Valanthi. I would like to discuss the possibility of a new relationship between our peoples, one based on respect, not fear." Marcus allowed himself a small nod. "Humanity would welcome such discussions, Your Majesty." "Good." The Queen returned to her throne and sat down. "This ceremony is concluded. All representatives are dismissed." The throne room began to empty, but the conversations that filled the air were very different from those at the beginning. Species that had ignored humanity for 50 years now watched Marcus with new eyes. Some looked wary, others looked hopeful. A few looked at him the way soldiers look at a comrade who has proven himself in battle. The Dreth war chief approached Marcus as the crowd dispersed. He was massive, nearly 8 feet tall, his scales scarred from decades of combat. He stopped in front of Marcus and placed one clawed hand over his chest. "Human," he rumbled. "I was at Kepler Station. I was young then, a warrior seeking glory." Marcus looked up at him without fear. "I know, I have read the histories. Your commander Vasquez killed 3 of my clan brothers. I hated humanity for many years afterward. And now—" The Dreth bared his teeth in what might have been a smile. "Now I understand. She did what any true warrior would do. She protected her people. She fought with honor, even against impossible odds." He extended his hand in a human gesture of greeting. "The Dreth no longer hate humanity. We respect you. Today you have shown the entire galaxy why that respect is earned." Marcus shook his hand. "Thank you, War Chief. Humanity values the friendship of the Dreth." The Korathi ambassador approached next, his gray face still wet with tears. "Commander," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I do not have words sufficient to express what your people have done for mine. Humanity saved us when no one else would even acknowledge our suffering." "We did what was right," Marcus said simply. "Yes," the ambassador nodded. "That is what makes it so remarkable. In a galaxy of species who calculate advantage and measure cost, humanity simply did what was right. That is worth more than all the gold in the universe." One by one, representatives of other species approached Marcus. Some simply nodded their respect. Others spoke words of gratitude or admiration. A few asked quiet questions about humanity, about Earth, about the strange species that fought like demons and bled like mortals and never, ever surrendered. By the time the throne room finally emptied, Marcus was exhausted. He had stood at attention for hours. He had spoken more in one day than he usually spoke in a month. And he had carried the weight of 28 wars on his shoulders, displaying them for all the galaxy to see. He made his way slowly back to the human embassy. The transport ride was quiet. The guards who accompanied him were different now, still Valanthi, still proud, but they looked at him with something that had not been there before. Wariness, perhaps, or respect, maybe both. The embassy was dark when he arrived. It was late, long past midnight. His aide, a young lieutenant named Chen, no relation to the ambassador, was waiting at the door. "Sir," she said as he entered, "I monitored the ceremony through diplomatic channels. What you did in there was incredible." Marcus shook his head. "I just answered questions." "You changed history." Chen fell into step beside him as he walked toward his quarters. "By tomorrow, every species in the hegemony will know what happened. Humanity will never be seen the same way again." "Perhaps," Marcus stopped at his door and turned to look at her, "or perhaps they will see us exactly as we have always been. They were just not paying attention before." He opened the door to his quarters and stepped inside. The room was small and sparse, nothing like the luxury of the crystal throne. But it was quiet and dark, and for the first time in 15 years, Marcus felt like he might actually sleep tonight. Chen lingered in the doorway. "Sir, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "When the Queen asked how many battles we had fought, you did not hesitate. You said 28 immediately. How did you know that number so quickly?" Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he walked to his window and looked out at the alien city, at the 3 moons hanging in the purple sky, at the lights of a civilization that had never known true war. "Because I remember every single one," he said quietly. "I remember every battle, every soldier who fell, every sacrifice that was made. I carry them with me always. That is the burden of being human." Chen nodded slowly. "Thank you, sir, for everything you did today." She closed the door, leaving Marcus alone. He stood at the window for a long time, watching the moons move across the sky. Somewhere out there, across the vast darkness of space, Earth was spinning through its own night. His home. The world that had given birth to a species too stubborn to die, too compassionate to ignore suffering, too brave to surrender even when surrender was the only logical choice. 28 battles, 28 victories. 28 times humanity had proven that it belonged among the stars. But Marcus knew the truth that he had not spoken aloud. The battles were not over. They would never be over. As long as there was injustice in the galaxy, as long as there were tyrants and slavers and empires built on fear, humanity would keep fighting. Not because they wanted to, because someone had to. And because humans, for all their flaws, had never learned how to look away from suffering. He thought about the Queen's words, a species that does not know fear, but she was wrong. Humans knew fear intimately. They felt it in their bones every time they went into battle. They tasted it in their mouths when they watched friends die. They lived with it every day of their short, violent lives. The difference was that humans did not let fear stop them. That was the secret. That was the truth that terrified every species that learned it. Humans were afraid. They were always afraid. They just kept fighting anyway. Marcus Cole, commander of nothing and everything, veteran of too many wars to count, finally turned away from the window. He removed his uniform and lay down on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow there would be negotiations, politics, the slow, careful work of building alliances and reshaping humanity's place in the galaxy. It would take years, decades perhaps. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of an alien world, Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of peace. Humanity had spoken. The galaxy had listened. And nothing would ever be the same.